The concept appeared absurd. Never before had anyone attempted a complete aerial invasion of an entire region. Hitler's military leadership opposed what they viewed as an impractical and unnecessary plan that pulled valuable troops and training resources away from preparations for the upcoming Soviet invasion. Yet the Führer remained resolute. He was determined to capture Crete, the final Allied territory in Europe, regardless of the consequences. The Wehrmacht had already conquered the Balkans and mainland Greece. However, as long as Crete stayed under Allied control, it represented an enormous danger to the Axis powers, since it sat within bombing distance of crucial Axis locations, including Romania's Ploiești oil facilities. With the Royal Navy controlling the Mediterranean waters, the sole method of attacking the island involved an extraordinary and massive airborne assault. Hitler felt confident that the island's defenders were weakened and poorly equipped to resist the enormous invasion designated Operation Mercury. What Germany didn't realize was that the Allies had broken their prized Enigma code and possessed complete knowledge of the approaching invasion. The modest Allied garrison and the Greek islanders readied themselves for what lay ahead. If Hitler desired Crete, the price would be steep. The Balkans and Greece weren't originally on Adolf Hitler's list of primary objectives. His focus remained fixed on the Soviet Union, with Operation Barbarossa as his strategic centerpiece. However, Italy's Balkan adventure soon began disrupting Nazi Germany's plans. The Balkan situation started with Italy's assault on Greece on October 28, 1940. Benito Mussolini, eager to demonstrate Italian strength matching the Germans and viewing southeastern Europe as Italy's sphere, authorized this invasion. But Greece's military proved far tougher than Mussolini anticipated. Italy, launching an aggressive media campaign against Greece, labeled her a British puppet. Tensions reached their peak when Italian forces sank the Greek light cruiser Elli on August 15th. On October 28th, Mussolini presented Greece with an ultimatum demanding territorial concessions which Greek Prime Minister Ioannis Metaxas firmly rejected. The Italian offensive, launching from Albania with Royal Army divisions, encountered a wall of resistance. Poorly equipped and inadequately led, the Italians were stunned by the Hellenic army's determined defense, made worse by the challenging muddy terrain along the Albania-Greece frontier. Supported by British air power and equipment, the Greeks stopped the Italian advance and launched their own offensive, culminating in capturing Klissura Pass in January 1941. Historian Mark Mazur called this the first Axis defeat of the entire war, with Greek determination taking the spotlight. By February 1941, the battle lines had stabilized. Italy had increased their Albanian forces to 28 divisions, confronting Greece's 14. But Greek divisions packed more punch. March witnessed a futile Italian spring campaign. Casualties mounted heavily on both sides, but the Greeks faced particular strain on manpower and resources, lacking Italy's capacity to rotate troops and equipment. Italy's inability to conquer Balkan territories stemmed from multiple factors. The Italian military encountered serious logistical problems and wasn't adequately prepared for extended operations in the Balkans' rugged landscape. Additionally, the Italians underestimated the opposition they would meet from both Yugoslav and Greek armies. After Italy's opening strike, the Greek counterattack proved especially successful, pushing the Italians into a defensive position and requiring German assistance to rescue the situation. The invasion sparked resistance movements in the mountainous areas of Greece and Yugoslavia, leading to a prolonged and savage guerrilla conflict. British Special Operations Executive Agents, together with Army and Royal Marine Commandos, the Special Boat Service, and the Special Air Service fought beside Greek and Yugoslav resistance fighters against Axis occupiers. This resistance substantially pinned down Axis troops in the region, preventing their deployment elsewhere. Italian equipment quality also fell far short of expectations, and their fighting spirit declined throughout the campaign. Adolf Hitler viewed the growing British participation in the Balkan struggle as a potential weakness for Germany, particularly with Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union approaching.
The Balkans, abundant in essential resources like oil and bauxite, required securing to support Germany's war machine and shield its southern border. This urgency intensified after Bulgaria joined the Axis on March 1, 1941, quickly followed by British ground forces arriving in Greece. On April 6, 1941, Germany launched Operation Merida, invading northern Greece. Greek forces, already locked in a costly confrontation with Italy in Albania, had left their Metaxas line defenses dangerously understaffed. The German blitzkrieg, a tactic that had crushed previous campaigns, was unleashed once more. The invasion was marked by massive civilian casualties, particularly in Yugoslavia, where a Palm Sunday air raid resulted in the tragic deaths of 17,000 people, the highest single-day toll since the war's beginning. Salonika's capture proved a critical blow, cutting Greek supply routes in Albania and stranding their forces. Greek and British units, outflanked and outnumbered, confronted a desperate situation. The unexpected swift collapse of Yugoslavia aided German strategy, enabling them to flank Greek and British forces in the east and the Greek army in the west. The German military machine, reinforced by Axis allies Italy, Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania, rapidly conquered the Balkans. The British, initially deployed to support Greece, were compelled to withdraw. The aftermath saw the Balkans divided among the Axis powers, with territories annexed or occupied by Germany, Italy, Hungary, and Bulgaria. Greece's surrender came quickly to German forces on April 20th and to the Italians on April 23rd. The occupation resulted in a three-way division of Greece between Bulgarian, German, and Italian troops. Following the Italian invasion of Greece in October 1940, which failed to meet its goals, and the subsequent successful German invasion in April 1941 during Operation Merida, mainland Greece fell under Axis dominance. British forces and surviving Greek and Commonwealth troops evacuated to Crete, still free from Axis occupation. Crete's strategic value was considerable for both the Allies and the Axis powers. For the Allies, Crete offered outstanding harbors in the eastern Mediterranean and the capability to threaten the Axis's southeastern flank. Critically, British bombers stationed in Crete could reach the Ploesti oil fields in Romania, which were vital for the German war effort. This made Crete a key strategic location for the British to maintain their presence in the eastern Mediterranean. When the Germans directed their attention to Crete, they decided to capitalize on their aerial superiority by organizing a massive airborne assault, codenamed Operation Mercury. This operation commenced on May 20, 1941, and involved multiple German airborne deployments on Crete. Though far more numerous than German estimates suggested, the defending forces on Crete weren't a unified army. They lacked sufficient communications and heavy armaments, creating a massive barrier to their capacity to effectively resist the German invasion. Despite these limitations, the Allied troops, alongside Cretan civilians, knew what was approaching and prepared to mount fierce resistance. The German airborne operation inherently confronted numerous challenges ahead, and the entire plan depended on the assumption that islanded defenses would be minimal and that the civilian population would welcome the Germans as liberators. But for the first time in the war, the Germans would encounter substantial, unyielding, and savage opposition from a local population. Germany grossly underestimated what they faced and how challenging it would be to capture key positions, including the Malemi airfield, which was essential for bringing in reinforcements and overwhelming the defensive positions on the island's north. As German paratrooping tradition, the paratroopers would drop on the island with minimal armament and supplies. Then they would have to seize the airfield at any cost. If they failed, they would be stranded on an enemy island without ammunition or larger weapons, sitting ducks. Taking Malemi Airfield was everything. The operation marked the first major deployment of German paratroopers in force and the first primarily airborne invasion in military history. The battle would also determine the potential of paratroopers for the remainder of the war. As Hitler committed increasing resources and personnel to the Balkan campaign, he inadvertently weakened preparation for Operation Barbarossa, the planned Soviet invasion. Originally scheduled to begin around 1943, Hitler accelerated the timeline to May 1941 to demonstrate Germany's invincibility and discourage United States intervention in Europe. However, the Balkan intervention, notably the Yugoslav uprising, delayed Operation Barbarossa by approximately 4 weeks. This delay resulted from force diversion and the requirement to refit units after the Balkan campaigns. Now, the massive paratrooper operation in Crete threatened to diminish Operation Barbarossa's effectiveness even more dramatically. Hitler was wagering the entire war's outcome on this ambitious operation.
500 Junkers Ju-52 and 53 aircraft, damaged and worn from their engagements in Yugoslavia and Greece, were prepared for troop transport. These warplanes, many recovering from previous battles, were sent northward to various facilities across Germany, Austria, and Bohemia-Moravia. Against the odds, a remarkable 493 aircraft met the deadline, returning to Greece by May 15. Then came the challenging task of establishing the infrastructure. In Greece, only a few airfields had paved surfaces. Regarding the rest, Colonel Rudiger von Heyking surveyed them and stated they were nothing but deserts and that heavy-laden aircraft would sink up to their ankles. Von Heyking's assessment proved accurate. The airfield outside Topolia, previously plowed and leveled, now generated 3,000 feet of suffocating dust clouds with each departure and arrival. Consequently, aircraft formations were staggered by 17-minute intervals. This challenge of short and unstable airfields became a persistent problem in the German campaign, some literally built upon sandy foundations. Fuel, the operation's bloodline, became another critical obstacle. A massive 650,000 gallons of gasoline were required for the nearly 500 aircraft. Yet, as of May 17, not a single drop had been delivered. British forces had disrupted operations by destroying the Corinth Canal on April 26, trapping a German tanker traveling from Italy. Kriegsmarine divers were sent to clear the wreckage, allowing the tanker's passage. Once in Greece, trucks rushed to collect the oil and transport it to the waiting airfields. These fuel crises forced the mission's postponement twice. The operations day was finally scheduled for May 20. As midnight arrived, some aircraft still needed gasoline. The paratroopers, arriving at the last moment, were recruited to unload drums and fuel the tanks before they could begin their assault. To keep these soldiers alert and ready, they were given amphetamines. Crete's defenses were minimal. Despite knowing about the coming invasion through intelligence gained from cracking the Enigma code, British forces didn't have the manpower and resources in the regions to significantly strengthen the defenses. Before the invasion's start, the Royal Air Force hadn't even assembled its air power. The defenders knew what approached, but they were largely alone. Recovering from the loss of multiple aircraft in Cyrenaica, by April 1941, the RAF's presence in Egypt and Crete had dwindled to just 90 bombers and 43 fighters. Crete, lacking any aircraft reinforcements, remained wanting. Adding to this, several airfields were still under construction, nowhere near operational. Military resources in the Mediterranean were limited. The British command experienced 7 changes in as many months, creating instability. On April 17th, Group Captain George Beamish assumed command as senior air officer in Crete.
preparing to receive bombers from the 30th and 103rd Squadrons from Egypt and any remaining Greek aircraft to evacuate the W force. The Royal Navy attempted to deliver supplies, but most vessels retreated hastily under relentless Luftwaffe bombardment. Soon, only 3,500 battle-ready British and Greek troops guarded this island fortress. By mid-May, the 4 squadrons were reduced to approximately 20 planes, of which a mere 12 were operational. Worse, they lacked tools or spare parts for repairs. The only defenses at Allied-held airfields were modestly equipped with machine guns, fuel barrels, and a handful of tanks. In April 1941, New Zealander Major General Bernard Freyberg was appointed commander of the Crete force. By May's beginning, he commanded roughly 9,000 Greek soldiers, including local Cretan forces. The British contingent comprised 14,000 men from the original garrison, plus an additional 25,000 Commonwealth troops redeployed from mainland Greece. Although these units remained largely intact, they were stripped of heavy equipment. About 7,000 were evacuated to Egypt as surplus forces, with 3,000 remaining there. Between May 15th and 16th, the 2nd Battalion from the Leicester Regiment, previously stationed in Alexandria, reinforced the Allies' ranks. As of May 17, Crete's garrison was a substantial force: 15,000 British troops, 10,200 Greeks, 7,750 New Zealanders, and 6,500 Australians, reinforced by an additional 700 men from the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, courtesy of HMS Glengyle on the invasion's eve. Despite learning of the planned assault on Crete through decrypted messages as early as April 26th, the full scope and magnitude of the impending attack remained uncertain. The Allies misjudged, anticipating that the British might deploy paratroopers in the Balkans. The recall of Juncker's U-52s was mistakenly attributed to a Corinth Canal mission. British strategy was filled with misdirections, contemplating potential targets in Syria or Iraq. By May 3rd, even Winston Churchill was convinced the looming attack was merely a diversion. Despite others raising alarms, Churchill demanded further intelligence. The imminent invasion only became clear when the Luftwaffe stopped bombing Suda Bay and instead chose to photograph Crete in early May. The battle lines on Crete weren't drawn solely by soldiers. Villagers, young and old, armed with nothing more than pitchforks, kitchen tools, and ancient muskets, stood their ground fiercely. Some German paratroopers met their end at Civilian sharpshooters' hands before even reaching the ground. High-ranking German officers later reflected on Operation Mercury with astonishment, citing the unexpectedly tenacious resistance. They acknowledged that these Cretan civilians fought with intensity that rivaled, if not exceeded, any professional European military force.
When the press covered the battle, they emphasized both the invasion's brutality and the unyielding Cretan resistance. The deployment of paratroopers became a staple in German propaganda, while the valor of the Cretan population strengthened Allied morale. The London Times, on July 28, 1941, captured the defiant spirit with a moving note that 500 Cretan women had been deported to Germany for participating in their native land's defense. At dawn on May 20th, the first-ever airborne assault was launched as fleets of Junkers Ju-52s descended upon Crete, releasing beleaguered Nazi paratroopers. Under Major General Eugen Meindel's command, 3,000 German troops landed near Malim and Konya. By afternoon, reinforcements of 2,600 dropped at Heraklion and another 1,500 at Rethymnon. General Kurt Student's forces, however, faced terrible odds, with many being eliminated before even touching the ground. This put them on defeat's edge, awaiting reinforcements' arrival. The resistance they encountered was far fiercer than expected, with 40,000 troops, led by Major General Bernard Freyberg, mounting a staunch defense. Despite their courageous efforts, the Greeks were hampered by inadequate equipment and supplies. On day 1, the Germans broke through the Greek lines at Heraklion, capturing barracks and docks. A Greek counteroffensive recaptured both. To break Greek resolve, the Germans airdropped leaflets demanding surrender.
The next day, Heraklion was hammered by intense bombardment, forcing the diminished Greek forces to fall back to Knossos. By nightfall, none of the German objectives had been secured. 7 Junkers were shot down, and the Nazi strategy of attacking 4 separate locations instead of a unified, concentrated strike backfired catastrophically. Everything indicated a massive German defeat. The paratroopers were running out of armor, and without the airfield, they had no hope of being resupplied or reinforced. If the defenses had held just slightly longer, the German invasion would have been stopped before it started. But everything took a turn for the worse. The New Zealand 22nd Infantry Battalion, under Lieutenant Colonel Leslie Andrews' command, was assigned to defend the airfield. However, the battalion found itself amid an intense and chaotic battle, facing a German airborne assault. Paratroopers descended upon the area, putting immense pressure on the defenders. Complicating matters further were significant communication failures among Allied forces. Misunderstandings and unclear information about the ground situation led to confusion and poor decisions. As the battle raged, the battalion suffered heavy casualties and faced critical ammunition shortages, severely limiting their ability to hold their position. Amid the chaos, the defenders' widespread perception was that they were about to be overrun. This belief, though exaggerated, significantly influenced their decision-making process. The battalion believed German forces were stronger and more numerous than they actually were. Under this distorted perspective, and after a communications breakdown, the battalion decided to retreat from their position, leaving the airfield vulnerable to capture. Another crucial factor was inadequate reinforcements and support for the battalion. Without additional manpower and resources, their position became increasingly untenable. Faced with these overwhelming challenges, the decision was made to abandon their position near the airfield. This withdrawal proved a decisive moment in the Battle of Crete. The Germans, who had so far failed to accomplish any of their goals, suddenly realized their most precious objective was available for taking, and they immediately seized the opportunity. Losing Malime Airfield allowed the Germans to establish a crucial foothold, enabling them to fly reinforcements and supplies directly onto the island, strengthening their invasion force and shifting the balance in their favor. The decision by the 22nd Infantry Battalion to abandon their position near the airfield determined Crete's entire fate. After their disastrous performance, the Allies attempted to recover by launching a series of fierce counterattacks. A night assault on Malime was organized with 1 Maori and 1 New Zealander battalion. In the early hours of May 22nd, the 20th New Zealand Battalion mounted a 3-hour offensive. Still, it failed to recapture the airfield due to strong German reinforcements. With sea landings ruled out, potential support units were effectively sidelined. Meanwhile, German Stuka bombers relentlessly harassed the Allied troops. Italian naval vessel Lupo escorted 20 fishing boats from the Axis, aimed for Malime. However, Rear Admiral Irvine Glennie's Force D, comprising 4 destroyers and 3 light cruisers, intercepted them. The convoy was repelled, with half the boats retreating. HMS Orion suffered damage, ironically from friendly fire. Only 1 boat, carrying 3 German officers and 110 soldiers, reached Crete. Another reached Akrotiri, where it encountered a British Army patrol. Of those soldiers, only 1 managed to breach British lines and join his comrades. The Allies, in retreat, moved southward. From Malta, the 5th Destroyer Flotilla, comprising HMS Kelly, Kipling, Kelvin, Jackal, and Kashmir, and commanded by Lord Mountbatten, sailed to Crete. This deployment followed HMS Gloucester and Fiji's sinking at German hands. In a ferocious engagement, 3 Allied ships faced a barrage from 24 Junkers, JU, and 8 Stuka bombers. HMS Kashmir succumbed in less than 2 minutes. HMS Kelly, despite destroying 2 Stuka bombers, capsized and sank. HMS Kipling, miraculously surviving 83 bomb attempts, managed to rescue 279 men from its sister ships. On May 23, Admiral Andrew Cunningham called off daytime operations for naval vessels, considering the heavy losses. Meanwhile, airstrikes on Allied positions continued. The German advance continued, meeting diminishing resistance with each passing demoralizing hour. The Greek forces were down to a mere 600 men with dwindling ammunition, yet they still managed to slow German reinforcements. By May 26, German progress stalled, prompting calls for Italian reinforcements. A convoy departed Rhodes the next morning, consisting of a diverse fleet, including 3 destroyers, motor torpedo boats, fishing vessels, steamships, reefer ships, a riverboat, tugs, and tankers. Relentless in their push southward, the German forces combined aerial and artillery assaults with ground offensives spearheaded by mountain troops and motorized infantry. This onslaught led to the Suda and Britannia garrisons' fall. Behind the village of Vaskifu, Allied forces established a defensive perimeter. On the evening of May 27th, a mere 4 armed men repelled a German detachment that breached their lines. The following morning, an 800-man detachment landed at Suda Bay, providing crucial time for the garrison's evacuation. British diplomat Alexander Cadogan reflected on the situation in his diary entry for May 27th, noting awful news from Crete that they were defeated there and he feared the morale and material effects would be serious. Certainly, the Germans were masters in the art of war and great warriors.
The Germans fortified the road between Sauda and Chania, effectively cornering 2 Australian battalions whose only recourse was a desperate bayonet charge. On that same day, General Archibald Wavell informed Churchill of the situation. In acknowledging the inevitable, Major Bernard Freyberg ordered his troops to the southern coast for evacuation. Between May 29th and 30, a daring rescue effort extracted approximately 6,000 men, sending them toward Egypt. However, this escape was marred by tragedy as they fell under savage assault from dive bombers, resulting in grievous losses. By June 1st, a cumulative total of 18,600 men, including 32,000 British soldiers, had successfully been evacuated. Despite these efforts, when the Germans officially seized control of the island on June 1st, a significant number of troops, 12,000 Allied soldiers and thousands of Greeks, were left behind. While many were forced to surrender, a resilient group of about 500 Commonwealth troops, those scattered and lacking organization, waged a relentless guerrilla war against the German occupiers, persisting well into the year's end. Despite initially facing stiff resistance and suffering substantial casualties, the German forces eventually emerged victorious. The cost of this victory for Germany was significant. In addition to the loss of life, the Luftwaffe lost over 350 aircraft. The outcome of Operation Mercury had far-reaching implications. The heavy losses suffered by the elite German airborne forces during the operation significantly reduced their future use in large-scale airborne operations. Moreover, some historians suggest that the diversion of German resources and attention to the Balkans, including the campaign in Greece and Crete, may have impacted Operation Barbarossa's timing and effectiveness, the German invasion of the Soviet Union. The delay in launching Barbarossa, coupled with the extended Balkan campaign, possibly contributed to German forces being unable to reach critical objectives in Russia before the harsh winter's onset, which played a significant role in the operation's eventual failure. As is commonly known, it was Operation Barbarossa's massive debacle that initiated the Third Reich's unraveling. If this vision is accurate, Hitler's obsession with capturing Greece and Crete came at a staggering price. He lost everything for the little island.